Alright, hi everybody, how's it going? And welcome to another video. Now, today I want to do another album review from a band that is one of my top 4 favorite bands of all time. And this album is one of my top 5 favorite albums of all time. And that would be the band Judas Priest with the album Sad Wings of Destiny. I've been wanting to do a review on this album for a long time now. Now, some little background info on this album. This album came out in March 23rd, I believe it was, of 1976. It was recorded in Wales at a studio there, and it was released by Gull Records. Now, Gull Records wasn't really a big major label. They didn't have major label distribution. So this album, as good as it is, didn't really get the attention it deserved. A lot of people didn't hear it. Judas Priest did do a tour of England at this time, from what I understand. But, there's still a lot of people who had never heard of Judas Priest before, and it wouldn't be until the next year, 1977, when they went out on tour opening for Led Zeppelin on the Sin After Sin tour, that people really began to take notice of Judas Priest. But this album is definitely an excellent album. It's, in a lot of ways, a forgotten gem. Now, I first got this album about 20 years ago, listened to it, and to be honest with you, didn't really care for it a whole lot. It wasn't until about 10 years ago where I re-listened to it again, kind of rediscovered it, and was like, oh, this is a great album. This is definitely one of metal's blueprints right here. And I've always been a huge fan of metal's earliest days. I really have. And this certainly is kind of like I said, like the blueprint, or one of the blueprints of heavy metal. It came out just a little more than 6 years after Black Sabbath had put out their first album. And there is a Black Sabbath influence on this album, but there's also a Deep Purple influence, and a Queen influence, and a Van der Graaf Generator influence on this album as well. Rob Halford was actually very heavily influenced by the singer of Van der Graaf Generator, Peter Hammill. And, you could listen to some Van der Graaf Generator, and you could definitely hear this. You could definitely hear how he was influenced by that band, by Peter Hammill. And there are progressive elements to this album. When Judas Priest formed, it was around 1970, so they've been around a long time. It was around 1970 when they formed, and the original singer, Al Atkins, actually referred to Judas Priest as a progressive rock band when they first formed. And there were a lot of progressive rock influences. They are still on this album, and, but yeah, like I said, Al Atkins did refer to him as a progressive rock band. Al Atkins is a great singer in his own right, I should add. Not as good as Rob Halford, but who is? Who is? But still, he was a good singer, and he did actually partially write one of the songs on this album, Victim of Changes. And Rob Halford kind of wrote another part of it. They sort of merged 2 songs together, and they had Victim of Changes. And Victim of Change is just a great song. In fact, I recently heard a School of Rock group in Chicago that had, a number of kids in it, and they were actually covering Victim of Changes. And I just thought that was really cool, that, kids would discover this album, because it's never been easier to discover stuff like this than it is now. You can just go on YouTube or the internet, and you could quickly hear it, or you could quickly order the album. And I do recommend this album. I mean, so many things about this album are cool. I even like the cover art a lot, too. This is in the top 5 favorite of, my all-time favorite album covers. As you can see, it's sort of like an angel descending into what looks like hell or the abyss. And around the angel's neck is the Judas Priest symbol. And you don't ever really, know what this symbol means or what it is, and I don't think Judas Priest has ever explained what it is, and that is what I've always loved about Judas Priest. You know, they've always kind of kept it like real esoteric and mysterious like that. I've always loved that about them. And you have that here too. K.K. Downing and Glenn Tipton, you know, both very strong playing on this album. Glenn Tipton had joined the band right before they went into the studio to record Rock-a-Rolla. So he didn't have a whole lot of input on Judas Priest's first album, Rock-a-Rolla, but he had a lot more input on this album. And he delivers one of his probably best solos, I would say, on the song Dreamer Deceiver. It's really such a good solo. I also, you know, he's got a lot of good solos. This is probably one of his best. Also, I would say the solo on Beyond the Realms of Death is also one of his best, but this is really a good solo on Dreamer Deceiver. And Dreamer Deceiver, that was a song that Judas Priest actually performed live on the Old Grey Whistle Test, which was a British show back in the 70s that showcased a lot of bands. Judas Priest were on it. They performed Dreamer Deceiver and, you know, gave them some exposure at the time. Dreamer Deceiver was a very like atmospheric kind of power ballad. And after Led Zeppelin came out with Stairway to Heaven, all these bands, you know, would have a real like cool atmospheric power ballad on their song. You know, first it's very airy and kind of dreamy, and then it kind of gets real heavy, and then it gets slow again. Well, Judas Priest's version of that kind of song was Dreamer Deceiver. And you could definitely hear it and definitely check it out. You know, other bands had songs like that as well. You know, Leonard Skinner had Freebird, Aerosmith had Dream On, Scorpions had Fly to the Rainbow, Deep Purple had Child in Time, and so on and so forth. But yeah, that's definitely an excellent song right there. Like I already talked about, Victim of Changes, excellent song, still played at Judas Priest concerts to this day, as well as The Ripper, which is another one. The Ripper has, you know, like some parts in it that were kind of sped up. Because you got to remember, this album came out in 1976, around the time punk was starting to happen. And Judas Priest were influenced by that so much as they sped it up. They sped their sound up a little bit. They didn't become, you know, thrash, and they'll be the first to tell you that they didn't invent thrash, but they did speed things up a bit and did start playing a little bit faster. So, yeah, you know, another song like that, Island of Domination, is kind of similar to that. It's kind of sped up. You also have songs on here that have some, like, piano parts in them, like Epitaph. So, yeah, Tyrant is another great song. You know, some great songwriting right there. Also kind of a fast-paced type of tune as well. And, yeah, just a great album all around. Very influential. A lot of people and bands have claimed this album as a major influence. Particularly, I know Dave Mustaine has. Dave Mustaine has said that this album was a big influence on him because I think it was like his brother-in-law or someone like that found this album in his collection and he threw the album out. And sort of to spite that guy, Dave Mustaine wanted to become a heavy metal musician. So, yeah, yeah, just definitely something worth checking out. Because, you know, a lot of people will say that, you know, they like later Judas Priest, and I like all Judas Priest. I like the Painkiller era and beyond. I like the 80s stuff, but there's, you know, a number of people who are unfamiliar with this era of Judas Priest. And there are some people who absolutely love this era of Judas Priest. You know, I think because of the internet, this 70s Judas Priest is becoming a bit more and more popular. And I really liked 70s Judas Priest because I definitely felt the music was a bit more meaningful. I felt it was more creative than what they did later. I love what they did later, don't get me wrong, but I did think this stuff was a bit more creative. You had like every emotion on these albums. Songs very meaningful, very dark in some parts, atmospheric in other parts, you know, very introspective and thought-provoking in other parts as well. So, yeah, that's really what I liked about this album. So, and I should also add, this is Rob Halford's favorite Judas Priest album. I know he has talked about that in the past as well. So, yeah, still kind of underrated, I think, because I do think that if you're a fan of, say, just kind of maybe heavier music, say you're not really much of a metal fan, but you like Aerosmith or AC/DC, Van Halen, or, like those types of bands, Led Zeppelin, you would probably like this album. If you are a metal fan, you'll definitely like it. But if you're really not, you would still appreciate this album. You definitely would. I mean, there are parts of this album that are kind of like a heavier Led Zeppelin, I would say. But, yeah, this was the album where, it was kind of a make-it-break-it album for Judas Priest. If they didn't come out with something that got some attention, they were going to end. And like I said, they were on Old Grey Whistle Test and whatnot, so they were getting the exposure that they needed at that point. But, yeah, I know other people like Kerry King, for example, has definitely praised this album. He's talked about how good it was and what a good guitarist Glenn Tipton is. And Glenn Tipton is really a great guitarist. Most people don't even really mention him as an influence. In fact, Kerry King of Slayer is the only one I've heard mention Glenn Tipton as an influence. But yeah, like I said, he's got some excellent playing on this album. Glenn and KK really kind of, really get the dual guitar thing in full effect on this album. The two guitar thing at this point hadn't been done a whole lot. Wishbone Ash did it, then Thin Lizzy did it. Then Judas Priest thought, they would do it. They might add, and make their sound a little more full. So, definitely did work for them. And, yeah, so, if you haven't heard the album, again, the album is Sad Wings of Destiny. I do recommend checking it out. Like I said, if you're a fan of metal's earliest days as well, certainly check this out. I do recommend it. Judas Priest, Sad Wings of Destiny. That's all I have to say right now. As always, if you did watch this, I do thank you for watching. If you liked it, then please feel free to subscribe. But either way, as always, I thank you for watching. Have a great day.